Hello and welcome to another video, and again thank you for all your comments. It's been brilliant reading them all. I'm trying to work through every single comment that is on there. I know I do miss some, but I do try to go back and reply to as many as I can. That is the same for the emails. Since I put my email address out, I've been flooded with emails. Your stories are brilliant. I'm trying to get through them as much as I can, but there is a lot. You've sent me a lot of emails and I really appreciate that, and I'm reading all of them. And some put a comment, I forgot your name now, some put a comment the other day. They put a story on there about Bold Street in Liverpool and it was brilliant. So I've copied it because I think that needs to be kept as a historical record, as another event that happened in Liverpool. But also I want to say that a lot of people say, oh, have you done canoodling, have you done this, have you done that? Look at my So They Say list in YouTube. There's like nearly 200 videos that I've done now. A lot of them are in there, and I know it's easy to miss, but you go through my back catalogue and you'll probably find that I've been to that location or coming up to that location. Actually, there's something I'll talk about, and I shouldn't really, but I want to have a bit of a rant. So before I go to a location or an area, I reach out to the local pubs or hotels, the ones that I'm interested in going to. And normally you get a really good response. I'm trying to do this video about the ghosts of London pubs, the haunted pubs of London. And I've reached out to a pub in London that I've seen other people do bits on, and not very well. And I wanted to go there to have a little chat with them and just do a little bit of filming. Sent the email off. I got a really snotty email back. I don't know if it's under new ownership, but they're only landlords and that, they're only custodians of that building, aren't they? They're only looking after it for that period of time. And it's been there 400 years, 500 years. The building's more important than them currently, aren't they? I mean, I don't know, but it's put a bit of a spanner in the works of the haunted pub video. Every landlord I've gone and met have been really nice, really pleasant, and yeah, it's just a shame. I hope other landlords in London are not like that. I know the few that I have done have been really nice. So yeah, just a little bit of a rant I wanted to get in there. But today we are in Bishop Stortford, and I went there the other day, and first of all I was thinking, actually I've never been here. And then I remembered that I had. Years ago I used to work in the photo labs. I remember going there to cover a photo lab for the day and walking around that town and seeing the architecture and getting that old town feeling. It actually reminds me of places like Ripon and Skipton up in Yorkshire. Saying that, when me and wife and my daughter drove in there the other day, the first thing you see is the remains of the old castle. And unlike other castles, it just looks like the Teletubbies house now. It's just this mound of green earth there. It's a Moulton Bailey construction where you used to have the castle on top, but all's left is this big round earth mound. And yeah, first thing I just says, look, Teletubbies house. And yeah, but anyway, Bishop Stortford is an old market town. It was pre-Roman. The Romans come in, then the Anglo-Saxons took it over, built the Moulton Bailey. Then after that, it played quite a big role in the Civil War. So Cromwell's army actually slept in St Michael's Church, and they used that for a period of time during the war. And when they left that church, apparently it had to be fumigated because they stunk it out. But we are looking at the ghosts of this area, and there's a lot. There's a lot of ghosts around Bishop Stortford. I'm going to change that. There's a lot of ghost sightings around Bishop Stortford, but some of them may be of the same ghost all the time. And this is about a Grey Lady. And this is the first one we're going to look at. And this is the Grey Lady of Water Lane. Now, as I've said in the past, that when I research these ghost stories, I ignore anything after really 2005 upwards, 2007 upwards. Because of the influence of paranormal investigation teams, I include myself in that with Paranormal, although we were very honest in our investigations, and I used to research the history deeply in the museums, so I believe our investigations were the most accurate. But I don't trust other people's work. So all my research comes from really old books. This book smells lovely. It's a really old book. Actually, it's not really old. That's bad, actually. This one's only printed in 1973. But yeah, just books like this. Books that are really... they're just fascinating. They're just old books that have been written before the influence of the social media impact. So they're just more worth the information than Google, to be truthful. This is more solid information. But that leads us to the ghost of the Grey Lady in Water Lane. This Grey Lady gets around everywhere, okay? And you can hear a lot about her in this video. And she pops up in many locations around the town. I guess one of the best reports we have of her is in 1922. There's a lady walking down Water Lane with her son. Water Lane comes off of North Street in like a big L shape. The mother and son are walking down this road. They see this figure of this Grey Lady along the sides of the brickworks of the building. First of all, they take no notice of her, and they're just walking along, when this Grey Lady starts gathering pace, and she starts running. As she gets close to them, this Grey Lady starts screaming and running straight down the middle of the street. As she's about to pass the mother and son, she vanishes into thin air. Now, this is the sort of sighting that is repeated a lot over Bishop Stortford. When I say a lot, she is reported at the Star Inn, the Black Lion Inn, the old Boars Head and the churchyard, so she is reported in lots of multiple locations. When people have tried to research who she is, they come up with I won't say plausible explanation, but an explanation that she was a nun and she jumped out of a window of a building after falling pregnant, and she was at the Catholic school up the road. This is the Catholic school up at the top of Bell Hill Road. Do I agree with that? I don't know. Now, the issue I've got with Bishop Stortford, and if the person who does these ghost walks sees this, I apologise, I'm sorry, but a lot of the information put out on ghost walks are twisted. I've not been on this ghost walk in Bishop Stortford, so it may be absolutely bang on. But I do know, speaking to somebody who has been on the ghost walk, that it does contradict some of the stuff I'm going to tell you today. So my research from the old books is slightly different to what you may hear on a ghost walk in Bishop Stortford. So what I have with this Grey Lady is that she was a bit of a lady of the night, and the reason why she is seen in many locations around that area is that she used to walk around those streets touting for business, and unfortunately one evening she was mistreated and was murdered in Water Lane. And that's why the only sightings of her running screaming are in Water Lane, because that's where it happened. The other sightings, even in the high street, are of her just walking down the road. In 1943, 3 British soldiers are unloading sandbags in Water Lane. 3 British soldiers are unloading sandbags in Water Lane. They load them off the back of the lorry and they're stacking them up along the side. This is during wartime, so sandbags were often used alongside of air raid shelters. They're stacked all these sandbags up alongside the wall. They're sitting on the sandbags. They've lit a cigarette. Right in front of them, they say this Grey Lady appears out of the middle of nowhere and walks right between them and right through the middle of the sandbags. One of the British soldiers turns around and says to the other one, "Well, you don't see that every day." It's pretty brilliant. And you used to be able to see that story in the Imperial War Museum years ago. You used to have this little section, 10 new little wartime stories about Britain and how the British humour got people through the war. And this was just one of those stories up there. I just loved it. And I can just imagine that. A slightly more terrifying event happened to a taxi driver. The taxi driver is driving down the Water Lane Now he's there to pick somebody up. He thinks he sees his fare standing at the side of the road. He pulls up, winds his window down, says the name of the person he's meant to be picking up. This lady just carries on walking. He carries on driving alongside of her. Actually, he weren't curb crawling, was he? Well, no. Perhaps an excuse is picking up a fare and he's curb crawling. He calls out the name again, thinking that she's still not heard him, and again she just blanks him. He stops the car, opens up the car door, leans over the bonnet and says the name to the lady. The lady turns around and faces him. And this is where we get our first description of what she looked like. He describes her as around 30 years old, but with silver grey hair. And he's quite taken back by her looks. And he says, "Oh, I'm picking up a fare. Are you?" And he says the name again. The lady just gives him a blank look and just evaporates in front of his eyes. As you would do if that happened to you, is absolutely petrified. He gets back in his taxi and drives off. He goes back to the taxi ranks and he's telling people around now, when somebody relays another story to him that weren't in Water Lane, but matches the description of this lady. This taxi driver says on a late Saturday night, he's driving down towards where the marketplace is. The marketplace is a tiny little square triangle, really, when he notices a lady who looks like she's in distress. She is wearing this grey long gown. He pulls up alongside her. He walks around the side of the taxi and comes face to face with this lady. And again, he describes her the same sort of thing, around about 30 years old, with silver grey hair. And he's going, "Are you alright? Are you alright?" And the lady straightens up, and exactly like what happened to the other taxi driver, she evaporates in front of this taxi driver. Now this grey lady is often seen around that market square, but also walking up Windmill Hill, up to where the old Boars Head is. So she is seen walking up towards the Boars Head. People have worked out that she seems to take a certain path, and that is that she walks along Water Lane, over to where the Black Lion pub is, up to the Star Inn, then up to the market square, then up to where the old Boar Inn was, then heading up to the churchyard, and then up to the Catholic school. There's actually no reports of her being at that Catholic school or ghost sightings of her being near that Catholic school. I think people would jump to that conclusion that she may be a nun that was from there, and that links in with that story of a nun falling out the window, and they're trying to build a happy, not a happy ending, but a rounded story about where she could be going. But as I say, but reading the stuff I've read, I believe that she was a lady of the night, and she is the person that got murdered in Water Lane. Now, if you're looking for a really creepy pub, check out the Black Lion pub in Bishop Stortford. It's 400-year-old. It's Tudor. It looks creepy. It's brilliant. All what you'd think a haunted pub should look like. And the ghost stories are, again, does link in with the Grey Lady, but the ghosts of children are often seen in this pub and around the streets outside. For over the last 150 years, people have reported ghosts of children in this building. But what we do know is that Bishop Stortford was, again, like we spoke about before in Wales, was hit by the plagues and the Black Death and all that. Some people believe that the Black Lion pub was built on sort of not consecrated ground, but maybe a plague pit. Now we know this is 400-year-old. I don't personally believe that they would have built on a plague pit 400 years ago. People would have known it was a plague pit, and they just probably wouldn't have done it. I just don't think. I don't know. I know some buildings in London were built on plague pits about 50 years after that they were last used, so who knows really. But the ghosts of children seem to be very active. I don't know about the landlord there now, but I know previous landlords have been more than happy to talk about the ghosts of the children and the, use the word, shenanigans that they get up to in that pub. Unlike a lot of other ghost stories I'll tell you, this one seems to be quite happy. These children in the Black Lion pub just want to have fun, and they move things around the pub and they're laughing. When they turn back up, they laugh again. One of the things they do is that they like to move chairs around. So they like to move chairs around, and it goes back to 1980 when they set up this little function. I think it was for a funeral that they were getting ready for. Not a funeral in there, but a wake. Actually, was that? I think that may have been the Black Lion pub. I think used to be used as a funeral home back in 18th century. I'll check that back out and come back to that if I'm right. But they were setting up for this wake in this pub. And these are the people that are attending the funeral, that are putting all the chairs out and the bar staff helping them and all that sort of stuff. They leave to go to the funeral. Now, this is apparently quite a well-known and well-respected local figure. It was something they wanted to do right by him about having this setting done. They go off to the funeral. They come back. As they walk back into the pub, all the chairs have been stacked back up to how they were before they got laid out. They could hear children's footsteps and laughter around that part of the pub. They're quite taken back by what they can see. They go around questioning anyone. They go, no, nobody's been in there since you left. They go, well, somebody has, because all the chairs have been stacked back up. And the landlord was just like, nah, that's the ghost children. They've done that. As I was saying this story, right, I did almost say footprints. They could hear footprints. Somebody called me out for that on one of my other videos. They put in the comments, I was reading the comments, went, I've got to pull you up on this. You can't hear footprints. And I was like, no, you can't. But it was a slip of the tongue. I did mean footsteps. But as I said, bar staff often hear these children around that pub of an evening and when they're tidying up and all that sort of stuff. This is one of those rare occasions where just outside in the street, these children also haunt. So it makes me think that maybe these children were part of a family that once lived there, that they used to play around in that pub, but also were allowed outside so they could play in the street. Up and down that road where the Black Lion pub is, and it's right near the Star Inn, they can hear children playing along that road. Now, this isn't restricted to any particular time. The local milkman at 5 o'clock in the morning has been going along there and turned around and said that he's heard children playing right outside the Black Lion pub when he's dropping milk off. So there's a lot of these things that, over hundreds of years, these children have been heard a lot. Now, before we cover the Star Inn, we're just going to jump up to the other side of Windmill Hill. There's a building up there that was the home of army officers, and some army people were staying in it. Now, the story goes that the army officer was very, very strict, and he taught his men to be ready for any action at any time. He sneaks into that building one night and tries to surprise the soldiers that are asleep. These soldiers are more than ready because they don't know it's a test, and one of them shoots that officer and he dies. That officer is said to haunt that building, but not only that building, the whole of the road going down Windmill, and that takes you down to the church as well. And there's just some stories that, again, I always say you shouldn't laugh, but they are quite ironic. Now, he's telling these soldiers, you've got to be ready, you've got to be ready. And then, like an idiot, he goes and jumps out on them. Of course, they're going to think they're going to be attacked. They shoot him. I'd like to know what he's coming back to haunt. It's his own fault. Now, jump back down to the Star Inn. Now, the Star Inn is right opposite the Black Lion. Now, this was built in about 1660, something around that sort of time. And the first landlord we have is John Wald. John Wald is said to haunt this pub today. Some people report seeing a figure of a man literally walking about 3 foot above the ground round the back of that pub. Other people have said they've seen him behind the bar in that pub itself. Now, the pub has changed quite a lot over the years, so maybe the ground was slightly higher back then or something has changed, but this is also where we meet the Grey Lady again. Now, I'm going to say that we don't know that this Grey Lady is always the same Grey Lady. It could be just a different lady. It could be a totally different grey lady. Grey lady descriptions all over the world tend to be very, very similar. But apparently, the grey lady in the Star Inn has a thing for scaring cleaners. So over the years, from 1920 up to 2002, we've had cleaners running out of that building that have been petrified to go in there because the grey lady has scared the life out of them. One of my personal favourites is from 1985, and this is because it includes a Walkman. If you remember when Walkmans first come out, you thought it was a bit special if you had the proper Sony Walkman. And this cleaner must have thought she was like the bee's knees doing her job with a Walkman on. And she cleaned around the bar area. And she's got her head down. And she said that as she's sweeping the floor, I don't make these very spooky with me keep laughing, do I? She's sweeping the floor with one of those old roller Hoover things. And she sees a pair of feet. As she slowly looks up, this grey lady is standing in front of her. And again, she gives the same description of this woman in about her 30s with silver grey hair. This time, the lady doesn't disappear in front of her face. The grey lady moves to the side of the pub, walks alongside the wall, and then we don't know what happened because at that point, the cleaner flees the building and refuses ever to go back into that pub and clean that pub ever again. This isn't the only time I've said this has been reported so often over the history of that building. I wonder if cleaners get danger money for working in there now. But as we walk around the streets, we come up to the George Hotel. All these buildings have got so much character walking around now. I've got to say, as it was getting darker while we were up there, the buildings seemed to be almost staring at you. It sounds really weird to say, but they all had so much character that they almost like the windows look like eyes just watching you walking along. I know that sounds a bit weird, but that's just what it felt like. The George Hotel has got a number of haunted rooms in there, and a lot of people have fled those buildings. We've had military officers refuse to stay in certain rooms. They've been there before, they've had an experience, and they refuse to go back to those rooms, and they want to stay in somewhere different. But the George Hotel is where we first come up with the name of Sarah. Now, Sarah is given for the ghost of the George Hotel, but the name also comes up in the Boars Head. And some people believe that the grey lady that is seen around the area is called Sarah. Now, digging into this does seem to come from a seance that took place in two locations over 2 different nights. So the first night it took place in the George Hotel, and the second night it took place in the Boars Head. On both occasions, the seance brought up a girl called Sarah, who said that she was deeply unhappy, that she was a resident of that area, and that she met a grisly end. Well, if they're in their 30s and they've died, of course they've met a grisly end. I don't go into sceptical mode here, but you sort of know my feelings on that. People try to dig around the history of this, and they did come up with a girl called Sarah who used to live in the George Hotel. So they tried to link that to her. Could she be the ghost that is seen in that pub? Now, why is that linked to the Boar's Head, Sarah? Well, some of the literature I've read sort of comes to the conclusion is that maybe the landlords used to swap around pubs back then. I haven't got the records of the landlords of that. As I say, we've got the first landlord, John Ward, that we know is meant to haunt the George Hotel. Then he went into the ownership of a big family for about 300 years. I guess that's a big family. There's going to be someone called Sarah there. So, you know, you can make things fit if you want to, if you know what I mean. I'm not going to jump to conclusions on that. But again, you know, we've got the Boar's Head, which is now, looks like an Indian takeaway. Now, the Boar's Head is meant to be haunted by a minister from St Michael's Church over the road. Now, I do know that the Boar's Head was also used for, years ago, used to be where the priests used to brew alcohol, wine, but Apparently it was all above board. They used to do it for fundraisers and fetes for the Church of England to raise money for that church. But this pub, the Boars Head, was the favourite haunt of the priest, and it does seem that he still haunts that area. So much so that when he passed away, he returned to the Boars Head a day after his funeral, walked in there and scared the life out of everyone that attended his funeral before vanishing in the middle of the floor. Okay, so this is actually 29 minutes later since I've done the last clip, because as I was recording, my daughter phoned me up and went, "Are you picking mum up from work?" I forgot to come pick her up. So she finished at 9 o'clock and I was left like 8:59. I was sitting there still making the video. But anyway, where we were, we're still at the Boars Head. Let's say the Boars Head is now a restaurant. And we spoke about the old priests going over there. And I say the priests used to use this to brew their own alcohol. There's rumours of these tunnels now. Bishop Stortford has got a lot of tunnels around it, and years ago you could go on these little tours of the tunnels around Bishop Stortford. I'm not aware of any from the Boars Head to the church. I won't be surprised. I know that around the country you've always got these stories about tunnels and churches, and most of them are fiction. They're not really there. In some locations you do find them in Fobbing, and I believe there is one in Mucking, but most of them are myths and legends. Now there is a ghost tale linked to the Boars Head that I think some have got confused with room 21 of the George Hotel. When I was reading the book, now the book I was reading was printed in 1973, and in that book it says that in the Boars Head a gentleman is asleep in a room when he is awoken by a mist above his bed, and it's an icy cold mist. He stands up, and at the far end of that room is the ghost of a boy standing in the corner. Now this matches the description of room 21 in the George Hotel, where again you get this mist laying over the bed and a ghost of a boy or young adult standing at the end of that room and a weight on the bottom of their legs. So again, I don't know if people have made errors or this has happened in both of those pubs. Now it does seem that the George Hotel and the Boars Head may have gone head to head in the trade of travellers coming through that area. There are rumours that you had the highwayman of Dick Turpin staying in Bishop Stortford during that time, and he stayed at the George Hotel. The George Hotel was definitely the main area where people on the coaching inside would go. The Boars Head seems to be for more people turning up for the market than they were for the coaching in. So you get a lot of people come down to do the market stalls. They will stay at the Boars Head, and then the others will stay at the coaching inn. When we come to the next ghost, that is where these lines blur again on where this coach comes from. Some people have this coach coming out of the Boars Head or starting off outside the Boars Head. Other people have it coming out of the George Hotel. But this ghostly horse and coach going down Church Street and High Street before fading out halfway down the road. A lot of these sightings come from people around about the Market Square. So if you ruled out those sightings of the coach around the Market Square, the Market Square itself seems to have its own ghost tales. Some people believe that this is where people were hung centuries ago. I can't find no record of that. I'm not going to say it didn't happen. Just with the not massive deep dive I've done, I can't find that historical record. Yes, people were executed from Bishop Stortford. I can't find it on Market Square. Even more so that you've got the Corn Exchange right outside Market Square. This is probably something they won't want happening outside their building. Now the Corn Exchange itself, again, has got your ghost stories attached to it. This is your common ghost stories of things moving around, bumps in the night, flashing lights, and a smell. That smell seems to waft across that Market Square, and they say it's like a rotting fish smell, so really sort of pungent and horrible. People years ago tried to blame it on the sewers, but that's all looked into and the sewers were absolutely fine. But it sort of coincided with the figure of a gentleman seen by the Corn Exchange walking down and going across the Market Square. Now this market square, as I say, isn't very big. It is tiny really when you look at it. But people have said they're sitting on the benches in the market square early evening, and this figure that doesn't fit in starts making its way into the square. Before they can focus their eyes on it, it has disappeared. Other people say they're sitting there, and at the corner of their eye they see someone walk past, but when they turn their head there's nobody there. There is something that has puzzled me. When I was doing the research for this, going through a book, this book was 1949, and it was about the history of the area, and it talks about the bishop's house and about poltergeist activity within that house. I can't find a place called the Bishop's House in Bishop Stortford, so I'm not going to mention anything about that. But if anyone does know about this, the Bishop's House in Bishop Stortford, can you let me know? Because the poltergeist activity does seem rather extreme, and it's something I'd like to know a little bit more about. That said, though, if you do want to go to Bishop Stortford, I know I poo-pooed some of the ghost walks. Do the official ghost walk up there. It is done by someone called Steve, and it's probably going to be the best experience you're going to get, and I'm sure his history is pretty accurate. I know that over the years there's been some unofficial ones around there, and I say the feedback I've had from that is that they're not great. Now the next place we're looking at, and the last place we're looking at, is St Michael's Church itself, and this has some great ghost stories around it. St Michael's Church history can actually be tracked back to the 7th century, but the building you see today is mainly of a Norman construction and mainly built around about the 15th century. But what do we know about the ghosts and strange events around that church? Well, when you walk up to it, you can't fail to be impressed by the size of it. And all alongside that, you'll see it says the old monastery. Don't be misled by that. Those buildings were there before it was a monastery. The monastery was added to the back of that building. That was really part of the church before that. The only original section of that building that remains is round the back. I do put a clip in here of the old tower. So I'm not going to fill this video with all these ghosts of nuns from the monastery or monks from the monastery. I've seen other reports that say that this place is just flooded with ghosts of nuns and monks. I can't see that being possible, to be truthful with you. But the churchyard and the church itself does have many ghosts and spirits about it. We already spoke about the bishop who walked into the pub over the road just a day or so after his own funeral. He's also seen walking around that church, but no one fears him. He's just walking around keeping an eye on that place. What people do fear is the tall black shape that is seen walking around that churchyard. For the last 200 years, a tall dark figure has been haunting that churchyard. People have been walking around there of an evening and they see this figure at the corner of eye just dart across the gravestones. More recently, these reports seem to happen on cold, misty evenings, and people walking their dogs through the church. Ironically, when we were there, people do walk their dogs through the area, and I will say that he's just covered in squirrels at the moment, and I know some of the locals weren't happy that the squirrels were all there and they're nesting in the houses, so they were telling us that they're not that cute when they're living in your loft. So, and I can believe that, but they're not the friendliest of squirrels. They're not the ones in London and parks that come up to you. These don't need to get food off of humans. There's plenty of food there. But this churchyard has a feel about it, and I don't know if that's because the thick cover of trees gives it a very creepy feeling. But walking around there, I did walk around on my own, and you do get a sense of eeriness. And I know that is easy to get in churchyards. I'm not a fan of churchyards being haunted, and because of that, I don't tend to get creeped out in those churchyards. I've been in plenty of churchyards that are meant to be haunted of a night time and never really felt scared. I just think that bottom line comes down to, if you're a ghost, you don't want to keep haunting an old churchyard when there's better things you can go and haunt. But one Christmas in 1920, a lady has come out of that church after a Christmas service. Now this was an evening service because it was dark. She is one of the last ones out of that church. She walks around the churchyard and she's heading down the stairs at the back. when she sees a dark figure in the corner of the churchyard. As she's walking, this dark figure starts coming closer to her. Getting rather concerned for her own safety, she quickens her footsteps. This tall, dark figure glides across the graveyard with total ease and passes through the closed church doors. But only a few years after that, we've got a slightly different report. And that is of a family tending the grave of their loved one. When they look over, they see a tall lady, all in black, tending the grave over in the corner of that churchyard. After a few minutes, the tall lady stands up, walks over to the family, acknowledges them, and then starts to walk off. The lady of the family looks back up, only to see the lady start to fade away as she's walking down the path, and then just vanishes. And once again, we come to the Grey Lady. The Grey Lady is seen walking through that churchyard, but almost as if she's taking a shortcut. Now this would be, if she'd come up from the market, she could take a shortcut over to the Boars Head. That again indicates to me that she is more of a lady of leisure who is taken for business and following a set route that she would have during that night time. Or maybe that this is a lady that was running errands all that time and this was her set path to deliver stuff. I know a lot of stuff in the history points her to being a lady of the night if you don't go down the nun route, but there's an alternative. It could be that she may be a delivery maid. Maybe she's dropping off cheeses and eggs or something like that, and she's following a set route. When you think about it, all the places she's going to are pubs and inns and hotels. So could she just be dropping off food? If so, I guess she must be a little bit annoyed that she's either been called a prostitute or a nun. So what I say is that we were lucky when we were up there. The church bells were ringing, and the atmosphere that it created was very, very peaceful. There's no sense of dread around churches, and I don't tend to find that myself. Apart from Whitby Abbey, which I did find creepy. Being as we were sitting right outside the church eating pizza in the car in the pitch black, it was quite surprising. It did feel quite calming. But during the day, when we got to that church, I did get put off a little bit, because as I was standing there, black crows started coming down and landing on the gravestones. And I was like, I hope this isn't a bad omen, and crows landing on gravestones in there. But Bishop Stortford has got so many different weird and wonderful tales around it that, you know, this is just scraping the top of it. And there's other stuff like this Emily doll that people keep coming up with. Doing the research, you get thrown up this Emily doll that is meant to be haunted, but it just sounds like the Annabelle doll. If you know more about that, put that in the comments. I didn't really want to go down that route, but it just was very, very strange. I mean, you don't need to add anything more strange than what you've already got on Bishop Stortford. I mean, the road that the church is on Windmill Hill, a lot of those buildings along there have got their own ghost stories. Now, say some of them have got poltergeist activity in there as well. A lot of them are of children playing. There's ghosts of a boy that is said to walk up and down that street. Some people say he's from the same building that the officer was shot in, and he haunts that as well. But we've got no account for how that child died. But the whole area is steeped in this ghosts and myths and legends, and it was just a very enjoyable place to walk around. It did have a nice feeling around it. It felt very young. It made me feel very, very old. This was a Friday night. Everyone was getting ready to go to the pubs and the clubs. It reminded me of being a teenager or in my 20s going out to the pubs, and it made me feel very, 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 very depressed. Made my wife feel depressed as well. Just wish we was that young again. Oh, it's just so sad. Getting old. It's just horrible. I said, when we're talking about the time slip stuff, I'd have to go back to 1985. So, and that's what we're going to do. As we wrap this up, thank you for all your support again. if you like the video, and I've waffled a lot in this video, I do apologise. It's just, I just enjoyed going to Bishop Stortford, and I've tried my best to put that into this video. It was just a nice place to go. I had a nice time there. It's very hilly. It takes the breath out of you a bit. But yeah, I'd like to go there when all the shops are open properly and have a right good look around. It was just nice. But yeah, if you like the video, thumbs it up. I know for some reason my subscribers fell and my views fell, and I think it's got something to do with YouTube just suppressed me a little bit before I hit that 10,000 mark. It seems very, very suspicious that I was racing up to 10,000 subscribers and then all of a sudden I'm being held back. I've noticed YouTube have not pushed my videos out there recently, as if they want to just put me on reins or something like that. So let's see if we can hit 10,000 by the end of the year. Let's hope it doesn't take that long. But yeah, again, if you enjoy the video, thumbs it up and share it, hit the like button and all that sort of stuff. What you can do, if you could go back in time at the end of this video, in the comments, put what year you would like to go back in time at. So for me, I'd like to go back to 1985. So write the year you'd like to go back in time as. I haven't done that one yet, have I? Don't know. If not, I want to hear it again. So anyway, I'll catch you next video. Take care. Bye.